Finance Committee meeting. With us this evening, committee members present, Councilors Kuchmarek, Clark, and President Hay. Also present this evening, Councilor Joseph. We will start, councilors, with 16315 and 15815. I'm going to take them up together. First one's a petition of Larry Casassa, Community Development Director, to pass the order authorizing the submission of an application to the Commonwealth of Mass Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs under the Park Program in the amount not to exceed $250,000 for the purpose of making improvements to First and Railroad Street Park. And 15815, the order that accompanies the petition authorizing submission of an application to the Commonwealth of Mass Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Division of Conservation Services, under the Parkland Acquisitions and Renovations for Communities Park Program, in the amount not to exceed $250,000 for the purpose of making improvements to First and Railroad Street Park. We also have this evening Councilor Tran present. Mr. Casassa.
Good evening, councilors. Before you tonight is an order that is fairly self-explanatory. This is part of the prerequisite for us to apply for available funds for the state of Massachusetts Park Program. This is the same program that recently paid for improvements to a little playground. We have been able to partner with another agency, with the Massachusetts Opportunity Council, to cover some of the initial costs of this project. This involves a neighborhood outreach effort that was conducted. There was a neighborhood meeting conducted that the ward councilor Andy Green attended. It has been presented to the Parks Board. The Parks Board has voiced its support of this application. And what this would enable us to do is to make improvements to the long dormant or unattended park at First and Railroad Street that the city had been entertaining a proposal to abandon, but in fact never consummated that abandonment. So because the proposal involved in renovating this park, which would involve a basketball court and would involve essentially a passive seating area and a little bit of education about environmental safety. It's located, of course, adjacent to the Nashua River, which is one of the reasons why it will rank highly on the state's system for evaluating proposals under this round. They have a number of specific requirements for us to meet in order to be able to apply for these funds, and this park seems to most closely match up with those requirements. It will have permeable asphalt. It will have picnic tables. And it will have some stormwater infiltration built into it with a little bit of public education included as part of the design. Again, this was vetted with neighborhood residents. This is what they told us they wanted to see within the context of the grant requirements. So we have put together the preliminary application for it, but this action is a requirement in order for us to have a completed application submitted to the state. President Hay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Larry, you said this is for what was the First Street Playground and was abandoned. Is that still considered parkland?
It is still considered
under the jurisdiction of the Board of Park Commissioners?
It is still considered parkland, and it still would fall under the jurisdiction of the Park Commission. Yes.
Has the Board of Park Commissioners voted on this to adopt this and turn it back?
My understanding is that they have voted on it.
Reactive? Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Larry, I can remember going to the ceremony for Lowell Playground, and remember saying that $250,000 doesn't get you too much. And this is kind of the same. Where are we with that project at Lowell? Is that done, or are we waiting for more material, or exactly where are we there?
That project is completed.
When was it completed?
A couple months ago, I would say.
It was
there
after
were a
the
couple
winter
of punch
season?
list items the contractor needed to take care of.
Okay.
But it was closed up recently, and we released, I believe, the final retainage on that project maybe a couple, 3 weeks ago.
Well, I just think about some of the needs that we have down there, and I don't know. It's maybe in the future, and I don't know about the cost of having like a water park like we do up at Crocker,
That seems to be getting great use up there. I think something like that might be great for this neighborhood, given the cost, which I don't know. Maybe next year.
It wouldn't preclude that element being added at some point.
There's really, I think that would be great for the kids back there, back in that lot. But, thank you.
The houses that were built along right next to the park, are those all occupied?
My understanding, they're all occupied. They're all single families that were built by the city
Right.
with home funds a number of years ago to try to bring some owner occupancy into that corner because there were some concerns about that area at one time. And my understanding is that they're all still owner occupied properties and that they're reasonably well managed or maintained.
Do you have an idea of how do you get the demographics of how many people are in that area that this park would serve? Do you know how many people this park would serve?
I'd have to look into the grant application to look at the immediate population of the census block group that it's serving, but it principally would serve the neighborhood between 1st and 5th Street, which is a pretty densely populated lower income area, which is one of the criteria actually for the grant application, that it'd be in what's called an environmental justice area, an area that has demographics that shows a high level of need.
And I guess that was my next question. What is the occupancy of that neighborhood with the apartments and the buildings? Is that, I know it's a densely, there's a lot of houses down there, but are they populated houses? Are they populated apartments? Is there a lot of people living in that area? I know there's apartments, elderly apartments, and some apartments on the end over by the bridge, but is that area populated, or is it pretty run down?
It definitely has signs of deterioration in some areas. It's also extremely densely built, so that the distance between properties is sometimes 5 to 10 feet from one property line to the next. In that way, it's probably the densest built neighborhood in the city. Well, I don't know that we have any other neighborhoods that are quite built that way, where it's that is. Well, no, there are plenty of areas where we have the traditional triple deckers, but usually they're on 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lots. These are sometimes on 1,500 square foot lots, and you can literally reach and touch the property next to you in some cases. That's really what I'm referring to.
I guess I'm concerned that I'd like to see how many people they intend to have served by this park. I mean, this area is, I don't see a lot of people. I walk in that area. I don't see a lot of people in that area. I see a lot of abandoned houses in that area. I see a lot of not great places in that area. How would we would we have a 24-hour camera to monitor that park? I mean, I just don't see that as being the greatest place to build, to put our resources, and I guess maybe sometimes that's why that area might need the resources.
Well, to answer the first question, I'm pouring through the application. It notes that recent review by the city of the demographics of the area served, and this must be the census block group, which isn't necessarily just 1st through 5th, but it indicates that over 8,000 people live within a 1/3 of a mile radius of the park. So that's the density measure that they would use. There are concerns, or there were concerns, and this is what led to the abandonment of that park for all intents and purposes in past years, because a large number of people were using the park. There were no houses located near there, so there was no neighborhood supervision, and so a lot of vandalism occurred in some of the old park facilities, and we were constantly running over there and making improvements to try to keep the park up. So that was the history. That was before those houses were built, and I think having owner-occupied presence there helps to some degree with policing the park. And I think the other factor that would probably have a significant effect is that the state has set aside in the FY19 Transportation Improvement Plan a significant amount of money to construct the Twin Cities Rail Trail, which will be running right through the end of First and Railroad Street. And there's going to be, hopefully, a lot more interest in the public in the use of that area for recreation, and that's going to create a presence that will discourage only its use by homeless people or by unsupervised youth who
Yeah, like
are
I
committing
just my
vandalism.
reservations. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I
like
mean-
a homeless corridor. I've been down there even when I first became a counselor with one of the someone from the police department. We got to the end of the street. There was people drinking at the end of the street because that's where it starts, where they start to live. I mean, people live down there that don't
Right.
have houses.
I agree. And until we address that area and try to reclaim it, it's probably going to remain that way. So this is part of the effort to try to reclaim it.
That's why I applaud the effort. It's just that we have so many parks in the city, and to put in another park, are we going to be able to properly maintain another park? Is the park department going to sign up that they are the owners of this park, or is Mark going to sign up to say that they will take care of this park in perpetuity? Or, I mean, we've had that one go Riverside Park and stuff like that. I mean, is it the city that's going to sign up to maintain another park?
Ultimately, well, it
With
would
its
be the
8
city's
people?
responsibility, and the reality is it's always been a park. It's just that the facilities are completely removed or torn down, so it's little more than a glorified parking lot right now. But it always has been a park, and the city simply stopped improving it or responding to the damage that was occurring there a number of years ago.
Do we want to take our limited park and recreation resources and put in another park? I mean, at what point do we say the city can support Cogsall, Lowe's, all of the parks that we have, and still build another one?
It's a good question. I mean, the resources involved here are state resources, not our resources.
To build it, right.
To build it. So those resources are obviously an attraction because it's an opportunity to take an area and turn it into a useful park.
Right.
But we are taking on responsibility in terms of then trying to maintain that park going forward. So we have to do that with both eyes open. I agree with you. I guess it comes down to the perspective that we have as a city as to whether or not we think that that park will be maintained and whether or not we can stimulate enough interest in the abutters to create and adopt a park approach to it as we have in other communities. But again, I think it comes down to how we approach it as a community, whether we want to go after this resource. The reason for this application was because the park program is pretty specific about the criteria that they're using to measure grant applications this year, and this one was a very good match
Right.
with those requirements. So we didn't really have the alternative if we wanted to attract these funds to apply for some other park, because they were looking for an emphasis on green infrastructure, they were looking for an emphasis on education, and they were looking for another key partner in the application process. And because Mock had an EPA grant for environmental clear water purposes, they are paying for a portion of this project, the $350,000, and they're paying for some of the design work. And they did a lot of the legwork in putting the application together. So the opportunity presented itself. Now that opportunity is being presented to you for your consideration. And I fully appreciate that it's a balancing act. And if we do go forward with it and we do get the grant, that we're going to have to take on the responsibility of maintaining that park going forward.
Right. I guess I'd feel more comfortable if I saw Mr. Laxo sitting next to you signing up saying, yep, we'll maintain it. And if I saw 20 kids in the audience saying we need it, and Marco sitting over there saying we support it, but it's just you and a request for $500,000 that, or another park. I don't even care the money. The money is irrelevant. It's another park, and we already have limited resources to maintain the parks that we have, and they do a great job of it, but I just don't know how far we can stretch them. So.
Considering this is a state grant, I understand it's not going to be paid at all by the city, but it's still taxpayer money. What frustrates me about these kinds of grants is the litany of restrictions and requirements that would even get it to be qualified. Because the first thought that popped into my head is there are other parks throughout the city of Fitchburg that are very much used by a lot of people. Park Hill, the Walton Street Park playground area, Coolidge, of course. And I know we have CDBG funds that goes towards parks and playground improvements and whatnot. And this would not really be an improvement. This would be a kind of a rebuild of the whole park because there's nothing there now. But driving by some of these other parks, the conditions on some of these parks are less than optimal. The ground is torn up. There are pads missing, rims missing, backboards gone. So when I saw this grant, it kind of sparked in me a thought of, we're going to spend $250,000 on a park that has nothing right now, whereas our other parks that we have are in some cases bad shape, and we're not really dedicating resources to that right now. So what always concerns me is we're going to spend this money, and then we're responsible for maintaining it. There's a park on Boylston Street that is defunct. It doesn't work. It's not being used. Commissioner Laxo told me that technically under the zoning, that piece of land is still considered a city park. The DPW maintains it and whatnot. You know what I'm talking about. And there's equipment that's old there. It's not used. It's a defunct park, but it's still considered a park. And I believe the city's been looking into trying, ideally, to sell that parcel of land to a private person because, as Commissioner Laxo told me, they don't want anything to do with it anymore. There is a park in the 1st through 5th Street areas. They're not up by near the 5th Street Bridge.
There's a small playground.
That's more for like little children, right? That park. So this one would be more for probably more older individuals.
Older youth and adults.
Yeah. Okay. So, like I said before, I don't want to see an empty lot. I don't want to see it not be utilized. If we were going that way, then we would have to try and sell the parcel to get it off our hands. So, I will support the application and moving forward with this. I do have a concern about how much that'll be used, but considering there's over 8,000 people in that densely populated area, a few hundred people using that park every week is a lot of people. So I'm sure it'll serve its purpose. I'm just not comfortable right now about maintaining it. I know we have a parks board, and I know they have jurisdiction over the parks, but quite frankly, we approve the budgets, and all of these parks we keep investing in, I think Mr. Laxo has 4 people. God love them. I don't know how they do it. They certainly get a lot of guff from me, from residents saying, when are you guys going to come and cut the grass over here? So I have a concern about that. I've always had a concern about that. But I don't want the parcel to sit and rot like it is right now. So beautifying it is better than nothing. Thank you. Councilor Kuchmarek.
Mr. Sassa, thanks for being here this evening. The park program, worked closely with you on Lowell Playground, and I think that was certainly a very solid improvement to the playground and the park there. I think it served kind of a priority area with a high concentration of people, and certainly an area that hopefully continues to move on an upward trajectory. So I saw certainly the benefits of the park there. And it seems like that was kind of an area that you had been targeting to with looking at the Art Museum, B.F. Brown, some senior housing in the area. So I understood the strategic interest there. Realizing parks' criteria for what they look for, how do we as a city kind of evaluate, like, what criteria and benchmarks do we have for saying these parks are priority over others? And I realize that's not just you; that's our Parks Board and Parks Department as well. But were there other parks that came into consideration here? Is this the only feasible option? Can you give me a sense?
Well, when the request for proposals came out from the state for the park program this year, as in every year, what we do is we try to look at what this year's criteria involves in terms of how they're going to rate the applications, and then we try to match that up with whatever park potential park projects that are out there. Unfortunately, the meat and potatoes kinds of things, like taking certain elements of existing parks that have gotten grants in the past and doing follow-up, I don't want to use the term maintenance work, but essentially repair work or just selective replacement work of particular pieces of equipment that may have failed, is not something that gets rated highly, even though I agree that that's really where a lot of these resources should go, because communities don't always have the resources necessary to keep them up. In this case, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, this park, and because Mock had the EPA grant and they're working in that neighborhood and they had the opportunity to do all the neighborhood outreach that the grant required, that made it a fairly simple process. We might not otherwise have chosen to apply for the grant program this year because we didn't see any other very competitive proposals that we could come up with.
So I too share some of the concerns of Councilor Joseph and others who have kind of expressed the ability to maintain it and potentially the impact on the Parks Department, who's already overtaxed and overburdened with the various parks. But it sounds like there's an opportunity of we have land, it's already declared parks land, and once you've declared parks land, you're kind of sworn to uphold it and keep it looking nice. And it sounds like we've been negligent in those duties and responsibilities. At some point, a decision was made by the city that this is parks land, we need to maintain it, or shift our obligations elsewhere. But it's still parks land, and I think it's incumbent upon us, when we have opportunities like this, particularly for outside resources, that we do reinvest. Particularly in a neighborhood like this, parks can improve a neighborhood, provide recreational opportunities, particularly for those who might not have an opportunity, nice summer days and fall weekends like this, like we just had, to get away. Our city's parks may be those only opportunities. And for that reason, it increases pride, it increases ownership in a neighborhood. Like to give our neighborhoods, the opportunities to improve and the resources to improve and better themselves. Mock has certainly proven they have a solid track record of being a great asset to our community. Hopefully they can do some strong outreach here, and I hope they continue to partner with us in this area to make sure that it isn't just this is a nice $250,000, $350,000 investment in the area, and then within 5 years it's overrun or underutilized. Certainly, I hope we can lean on them to help make sure that people are aware of the park and have ownership stake in that park in terms of its usage. So for that reason, I will support it. I certainly would like to see, if we could, and I guess I was negligent in reaching out. I'd like to see either Commissioner Laxo or a notice from the Parks Board just saying yes, they're in full support of this and in being able to maintain it moving forward. But pending that, this will have my support. Thank you.
If I may, through the chair, I'm certainly willing to make an effort to communicate with you between now and the council meeting with regard to the Parks Board's position on this, as well as the DPW's concerns, if any, about this park. And I'm willing to commit to some effort on our department's behalf to try to encourage some sort of adoption program among neighborhood residents, to try to press Mock's outreach people to sort of more formalize a commitment on behalf of the neighborhood residents to at least make some effort to maintain this park if we do get awarded the grant and it does get built.
Yeah, the discussion is, for me, raised questions and concerns that I think we need to do some serious thought and deliberation to. First is, as Councilor Joseph and Councilor Kuchmarek talked about, and the chairman, about the park commissions and DPW and whether they're on board or not on board, and how supportive are they of this. Second is when Mr. Sasser uses the number of 8,000 residents, which was then repeated by a councilor's justification for this. Well, when you're using 8,000 residents, you're using a third of a mile radius to get to your 8,000 residents. My guess is that over half of them are across the railroad tracks and on Summer Street. They're not going. They're not going to go to the Fifth Street Bridge or to the Water Street Bridge to come around to get to that park. That's not happening. So the 8,000 people is not a real number, and that does not mean if the number is 3,000 or 4,000 that we don't need to do something for those people. But the reality is, there's no way 8,000 people live between Railroad Street, Water Street, Fifth Street, and First Street. No matter how close the houses are together, that's not a real number. Second is, or third for me is where the park is located. If you take that section you're talking about and you look at it as a rectangle, here, well, it's down in one corner. It is all the way down in the back corner, which means it's not in the middle. It's in the corner, so I think that makes it more difficult and more unlikely that people will use it. I also think it makes it more likely that people will use it for the wrong reasons, because it's down there and it is isolated. And I know we've built the 3 new houses there, and that's nice, and hopefully they'll use the park and want to keep an eye on it. But to spend $350,000 to build a park for 3 houses is a stretch for me. And the last piece is, have they addressed the safety concern of attracting people that close to the railroad tracks? Because I can tell you, I grew up on the other side of those railroad tracks, and every single mother in my neighborhood, the only rule that you weren't supposed to break was to get near those train tracks. That's danger. Is there, I don't even know, Larry, is there screening there? Are they going to build anything? Are they going to make sure that people don't have access to the, you draw them down there and then everybody's going, oh, all these high school kids, let's go over to the tracks. Can you answer some of those?
Well, at this point, we can't go on to the railroad company's property to erect any sort of fencing to prevent access to the tracks, and that's why over the years there has been access for that whole length. But I mentioned to you earlier that the state has approved an earmark for construction of the Fitchburg-Leominster Rail Trail in their FY19 TIP, and we are meeting later this month with officials from the state and the city of Leominster, and we are apparently going to be working out an arrangement for the acquisition of that abandoned rail corridor. And when that happens, one of the conditions of that will be that we erect a barrier that separates the active rail line from the abandoned rail line, because people will be using that rail trail now from throughout the city. And certainly the intent is to connect the 2 downtowns and to create a trail in Fitchburg that people will want to ride their bikes on and take their family on walks on. So there's going to have to be, especially for the first half mile of that, going well past First Street, there's going to have to be a high, at least 8-foot chain link fence that separates the rail corridor, that will be the trail, from the active rail line. That's a minimum requirement because it's within 50 feet of an active rail line at that point. For right now, because the park really isn't there.
Are we putting the cart before the horse?
The park is on the other side of Railroad and First Street from the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
As part of this project, we can't use any resources, and we don't have any resources to somehow erect a barrier across the street to prevent that.
But if you build the park and then the other thing doesn't go through, then you have built a park that has access to the train tracks.
Right, we'll be restoring the park that always did exist across from the train tracks. Yes, that's true, but I have to say that the earmark looks like it's going through. It's been approved. Over $10 million is being set aside in the FY19 TIP under the CMAQ program. And there's another earmark that Congressman Olver left us a number of years ago that has a couple $1 million left in it that will be used toward the acquisition. And the state's meeting with us to talk about covering the gap between that amount and the actual cost for the acquisition. Because of that level of commitment, I'm pretty confident that it's going to actually happen this time.
And last for me is because I do have concerns about the park commissioners and the DPW. Is this time sensitive, or if the committee were to hold it until we get those people and talk to them, that have any fallout?
We submitted a pending application about a month and a half ago, and we this petition went before the council before the recess, and we held it off until after the recess because the state told us that they would hold off on this element of the requirement of the proposal for at least another month or two. I can check with them to find out whether or not there's a drop-dead date by which we have to show the city of Fitchburg serious about this application before they make their decision-making process. I can ask them. I don't know what it is. This arguably should have been done prior to submitting the application, but there clearly wasn't time to do that. So they said, it's okay if you submit the application. We'll hold off on that element as long as we know it's coming. At some point when they're actually sitting down to deliberate over the applications that they get from the rest of the state, they're going to say, well, this application still doesn't have a commitment. We don't know if the city of Fitchburg actually is committed to this project. That's what I want to avoid, and I can make a phone call to them to find out if there is such a time period.
Yeah, but that phone call won't answer tonight's question.
No, it won't. No, I can get back to you with an answer if you have a question.
Thank you.
Larry, when was the last time the city did any kind of maintenance to this park?
I would imagine the last time the facilities were actually in use, and that dates back, in my memory, more than 10 years.
And do you know the reason why we abandoned the maintenance portion of this park and decided not to provide any kind of service to the park?
Yeah, I think over time what was happening was that, there was a handball court there once, and there were, I think, a basketball hoop that was up there at one time, Councilor Clark may recall. There wasn't really any comprehensive facility there to begin with, and the handball courts grew out of use, and the street hockey they were playing there, and the basketball hoops were damaged, and they were. I guess the DPW was probably making an effort at the time to replace. I think we used block grant funds probably 15, 20 years ago in an effort to replace some of that equipment. But it was subject to further vandalism, and for the reasons that were mentioned. It has access. There were a fairly large homeless population living on the other side of the tracks in the Sawyer Passway area. There were no houses there at all, and so it was kind of an area that wasn't under anyone's eyes, and consequently, there was more vandalism there than in other parks. And I think we gave up the effort to continue maintaining it for that reason.
Aside from the vandalism, would it be safe to assume that we stopped performing maintenance on it because of the lack of interest and use of the park?
I think the facility was getting use at one time. I don't know at what point the use stopped and whether it was strictly because of vandalism rather than lack of interest, or whether it was lack of interest.
So my concern is this, Larry, is that when you look at the map, the park is, as mentioned by President Hay, it's hidden behind a section of the city where it's not noticeable, not visible to anybody. And like you said, it's attractive to you could say criminal elements, and vandalism falls under that category. So I'm just wondering that if we spend this much money on this park, and 5 to 10 years down the road, and considering that we don't have the resources to maintain another park, it's going to fall apart again, and then we're back to square one. That is something that I really, really don't like to see. But on the same token, if the resource and opportunity is there for us to clean up an area in the city, and revitalizing the city is one of the component of our objective in the city, I would absolutely in agreement that to support this application. Furthermore, what we're passing tonight or discussing is really just an application to move forward. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're guaranteed to get this grant.
That's correct.
So, is there going to be a time where you will be coming back to this council, giving us an update to how far the process has taken and whether there has been a decision made upon our submission of the application?
I would be happy to inform the council as soon as we get word.
Okay. Thank you, Larry.
I know we've talked about this enough, but there's a cycle here. We invest money into a park, make it nice, and then after 20 or 30 years, it goes to hell. The city says that we don't have the money to maintain it. We don't have the money to do improvements. Continues to deteriorate to the point where the DPW and the city make a decision because of the limited resources they're under with all the other parks. We can't afford to waste our time with this one. This one's already a lost cause. Let's use our resources for the rest of them. Then these grant opportunities come up, and it's Community Development's office's job to search for these grants and find these opportunities. So there's no disagreement there, but where it gets difficult for me is Community Development Office submits the grant application. Let's say we win the money. Okay, now the DPW's got to invest time and resources to maintain it. And then we have to replace the equipment. And then we have to do this. And then we have to do that. And then eventually it gets to a point where we can't do it anymore, and it becomes like Boylston Street. And then we're back again with the cycle of, oh, here's another grant for First Street Park to re-beautify it. So I feel like a little hypocritical if I were to support this, Larry, only because, not because of what you're trying to do or your office is trying to do. You're getting opportunities, I understand that, but just because there's a grant available doesn't mean the council has to go along with it, unless there is assurances that it's going to be properly maintained, and not just maintained, that if there are equipment failures or if there's equipment needs, it's going to be addressed immediately. As I said earlier, there are parks currently that are in bad shape that we are having difficulty staying on top of. It is not unreasonable for some of us or all of us to be concerned that once this park is up and running, there won't be issues with that going forward, issues that we have right now with others that we're not addressing as it is. So, because it's a grant, a lot of people like to jump at the chance of it and go, well, it's free money, it's free money. Well, technically it's not free money. It's free money to get it started, but after that it's on our dime. So, some councilors tonight have said, well, I'd like to get assurances from the Parks Commission. And I'd like to get assurances from the DPW. My guess, Mr. Laxo and his staff, being as great as they are, they're going to step up to the plate and say that they're gonna do what they can to maintain it. But unfortunately for me, I expect that from them. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen because of all the other things they have on their plate. So there are legitimate questions here that need to be addressed. Number one, is that park going to serve a need for youth and younger adults? Is that park going to be maintained? And by maintained, I guess we have to be clear on what maintenance means. Is it going to be kept up to a beautification standard once a month, twice a month? If there's paint chipping, if there's equipment broken, is it going to be fixed on time? Does the city have money available in its budget to replace failing playground equipment? Sometimes I get the answer, we don't. Well, then what are we doing with playgrounds then if we don't have the money to fix the broken equipment? We're just waiting for an accident to happen. So these are legitimate concerns that we have before we submit the application, because once we submit it, if we win it, to me, we're kind of hamstrung on not accepting because the state's saying, here's a check for $250,000. $250,000. So this is the time right now to get these answers. So hopefully by the next council meeting, regardless of what this committee does, we can get some of those answers and some of those assurances. Although even with those assurances, it's still hard for me to kind of believe, given our track record. Councilor Joseph.
Did you say that block has $350,000?
No. That would be the total project cost with the matching funding.
Okay. So,
And the state share would be $250,000. It's very similar to the way Low Playground and a lot of other playground improvements we've gotten from the state have been, where they provide 70% of the total cost of the project, and the local community has to come up with the balance.
well, you have $500,000. Oh, that's okay. Petition in order. So, okay. Thank you.
I can certainly commit if this body chooses to bring it before the council next week to getting you further information about this as requested tonight, so at least you'll have the opportunity to consider that before you vote on it at the full council meeting.
Councilor Kuchmarek.
Mr. Sessa, is this is the scope of work pretty finite at this point, or is there still flexibility in the?
The design has pretty well been established, and that's one of the things I will be forwarding to you. It is a low maintenance design, so this is not quite the same as, for example, Low Playground or some of the other large playgrounds that involve expensive large play structures for younger age groups, because that equipment, when it does get damaged, does cost money to replace. The basketball courts would be the one area, but that would really be limited to the hoops and the stanchions. Would be subject to vandalism. The rest of the park is very low maintenance.
Particularly interested in two specific points that were kind of you brought up directly or alluded to. One is kind of the safety to rail, and I wonder, maybe there's a affordable temporary fix that buys us the fiscal year gap. Between FY19, when you're saying we can have funds, that may also extend another couple of years until work is done on the rail trail. I want to make sure we do have a safety plan in place. But second, is lighting an option here? Could I'm completely ignorant to how much lighting costs and what options we have there. But I'd love to know, is there a little bit of flexibility that allows us to add lighting here, which may, give us better safety assurances, public safety assurances moving forward. I don't know what that costs, and I don't know if Parks wants to have additional lights in their parks in the evening time. So for that reason, I was going to make a motion. Do we have someone else who'd like to speak before I make a motion? So with that, I was going to make a motion.
You can make a motion, Councilor.
I'd like to make a motion to hold. I know it's a pending application in right now, so at least we have something in. I'd like to hold this for 14 days. I just don't want to get in the process of waiting for something pending. Thank you.
Motion has been made and seconded to hold 163-15 and 158-15. Speaking on the motion. No. Okay.
Going to make a motion.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is held in committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I will get that information to you prior to the next meeting.
168-15, loan order, appropriate $1 million to pay the cost of acquiring a fire pumper engine, $460,000, DPW street sweeper and catch basin cleaner, $400,000, and police station renovation and repair, $140,000, as outlined in the enclosed loan order. We have this evening with us Fire Chief Roy and Police Chief Martineau. Chief, you want to start with the 140 for the police renovations and repair?
Good evening, councilors. This $140,000 before you this evening, this is to repair a long-going issue that we've had at the police station inside of our Sally Port. That's the garage where all the prisoners come in to the police station. The drain in the Sally Port has been damaged for the last 4 years, and what happens in the wintertime, cruisers come in with snow, and that snow melts in the Sally Port, and that water has been dumping right into our fitness room right below it. Like I said, this has been going on for 4 years. Last year, we appropriated the money within our budget for the engineering aspect of it. McKenzie Engineering completed the engineering design of it, and this $140,000 is for the construction of the project. In addition to the construction of the project, is to replace the damaged equipment that was in the room below it, and there is a slight amount in there for any cost overruns.
President Hay.
Was this something that the capital projects group has recommended, Chief? My concern here is I don't mind spending the money. We need to do this. We need to keep that building in better condition than it has been maintained over the last 10 or 15 years. My concern is that the police station is starting to get like other buildings that we've had in the past, where we keep putting money into a building that eventually becomes obsolete. So I don't know if the long-term plan is to build a separate police station somewhere else, or if we're going to build one on that same site, and then this is something that would be used and folded into that. I just always have the concern of spending $100,000 here, $100,000 there, $100,000, and all of a sudden we spent $1 million putting Band-Aids on the building where we really should be building a new building or doing a major overhaul.
We reviewed this project to see if there's some alternatives to spending over $100,000 to fix, quite frankly, a drain. And we couldn't come up with any other alternatives. We have to have a secured facility where we bring prisoners into the police station. We have to go behind a locked door before we take them out of a cruiser. So there was no alternative short of building another garage right in front of that garage, and that would have far exceeded the 100,000 plus that we're talking here. The price jumped considerably. We were going back and forth on the design part of it. Come to find out, we had to do a separation between the water and the gas, so we were waiting for a ruling from the building department. It was determined that we did have to do a separation, and the separation is what skyrocketed the cost.
Thank you.
The Capital Improvements Commission has reviewed this loan order, and they unanimously approved the expenditure for this need. On that note that Councilor Hay raised, to me this is part of not only preventative maintenance, but this is finding a problem and dealing with it swiftly. In the past history of this city with maintenance of buildings, problems like this we would let go and we'd Band-Aid it instead of doing a complete fix. Just like if there's a roof issue, we fix the roof. We don't let the roof deteriorate further and further and to the point where we can't even use the building anymore. So this has to be done. The question of whether we need a new building or not, completely separate and distinct, because it requires millions of dollars for that, which we don't have. So I would support the 140. Chief Roy, would you like to speak on the 460,000 for the pumper?
Yeah, just briefly, we'd like to thank Dick and the Capital Improvements. We've been to them a couple of times, and they pretty thoroughly research things, and we give them the best information we have. I just gave you a quick chart of all our equipment, our major vehicles that we own. As you can see, the two highlighted in red, even after getting a new pumper last year, are still very old with very high mileage. One of those will be replaced with this new pumper. I'm not sure which one. And the truck highlighted in yellow is the current engine one that runs out of Summer Street. It's got some serious problems right now. We're getting prices on how to repair that. So the truck that's a 1991, which is 24 years old, is running out of Summer Street right now. So this new pumper that we're asking for tonight will go to Summer Street. It'll be running out of the Summer Street station as engine one. One of the trucks in red will be taken out of service and sold or traded in on the purchase of the vehicle. But I look around, I think every council that's sitting here tonight over the last few years at some point has said all the years that we didn't have a whole lot of money has caught up with us, and this is good to see, that we're at least getting back to one. The Capital Improvements did recommend that next year we'll go back again and keep applying for federal loans for pumpers. Just we haven't been very successful in the area of pumpers, whereas we have been with ladder trucks and rescue trucks and some of the other things. So this is really badly needed, and it will be a first run piece that's coming out of Summer Street, and one of our reserve trucks will be retired.
Chief, what are the ones in red?
That's the ones in red, Councilor. One of those two are going to be replaced.
Okay.
I'm not sure which one. As you can see, the age and the mileage on both those trucks.
Yep.
Extremely old. One's a 1988, and the other's a 1991.
So the E1 that's in yellow.
That's the truck. That's the 1997
Yep.
Pierce. That is the current engine one. It's out of service right now because we've got some serious problems with the chassis. We're getting prices on how to best address that. I think we're going to be able to fix it. That truck should last us another 5 or 6 years because we're just not, we should, I think I've told the council many times, a first run piece should be taken out of service and put in reserve after 15 years, and the truck should be retired after 25 years, without question.
How many engines do we have?
We have 6 engine companies. 3 of them are in service all the time. 3 of them are in reserve.
And the 2 in red and the 1 in yellow, are they reserve trucks?
The reserved engine 1 in yellow is a first run piece, but right now engine 5 is in its place.
Okay. So we have to do major fixes to engine 1.
Correct.
And we have to replace engine 3 and engine 5.
This loan just calls for the replacement.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Councilor Kuchmarek.
Chief, just going to ask, what else do we have to look forward to in future years, and what is the current state of the
Yeah,
fleet?
I think
This
the only
is
other
great.
thing is and I brought this to the capital improvements, you can see some of our support vehicles have got some high mileage, and they're older trucks. One's a 1993, that's our plow and mechanic's truck, and the 2001, number 23 on the chart, that's got a lot of mileage. Matter of fact, we're not letting it out of town now. We're using it around town for business. So those are the other two things, but I think the Capital Improvements Commission thought that was more an issue with, we have free cash, that we had to deal with those, because they're small dollars. Those vehicles are $25,000, $30,000 vehicles apiece. So hopefully, when some free cash becomes available, maybe. Then after that, our ladder trucks are in good shape. You can see all our special operations vehicles are in good shape. The problem we have is pumpers.
Typically during budget season, I go blue in the face and I'm screaming about long-term assessment of our capital needs, and pleased to see that both you and I know Chief Martineau also keeps an active inventory of the fleet. You do a great job, and this gives us a good idea of what's going to be coming before us in future years and what your needs are. I think that's important, that it isn't always just reactionary. So certainly this is when you have a truck that's 25 or older and coming up on 20, we certainly need to address these. We can't keep our residents safe if we don't have our public safety officials in proper in the proper vehicles with their proper equipment. So this absolutely has my support.
Thank you, Council.
Councilor Joseph.
Is this the total cost, or is this the matching?
No, that's total. This isn't a grant. No, this is a straight loan, and that's the total cost of the truck. Yeah. Fortunately, we're on a state grant that we bought Engine 4 off of last year, and that's good until December. So we're going to be able to get in on that grant at the same price. So this is pretty timely that we were able to get it done before December.
And my other question is for Mr. Laxo, who's not here, about the DPW streets. Is it two vehicles, a street sweeper and a catch basin cleaner? Two different vehicles?
Yeah, Lenny did go to the capital improvements meeting. Actually, he was one of the key department heads because there's so much going on with DPW. So in the minutes, you would see the actual detail of the pieces. I'm not sure if he knew he had to come. I mean, he got a copy of the agenda, but maybe he thought he covered it last week. It's about $200,000 for each piece. What we did was, the goal was, I think the mayor's looking at one loan order this year and up to about $1 million, and this happened to become about $1 million or thereabouts. And we did approach Lenny and his staff on what he felt would best serve the department this year. And a couple of years ago, we did buy some big dumps with the plows and everything. And they're in good shape. Plus, there's a contractor that they recently came across that provides also that type of equipment. So these were the two items that he recommended: the street sweeper and the catch basin cleaner. They're both about $200,000 each.
I have no problem with the street sweeper. That's not my question. My question is more on the catch basin cleaner. Because I know the wastewater has several beautiful catch basin cleaners, and why isn't this part of wastewater as opposed to DPW? This to me should be done through the private funds for wastewater and not through the DPW. I don't think, is DPW still responsible for cleaning catch basins?
I believe they are. This is the shell or the clam.
Yeah, I know
that's
what
that is.
I mean, but they got those things. They've got.
Well, the others are more the cameras, and this is to get all the sand out of the catch basins.
Yeah,
which I believe they in EPA, and it's in the minutes of the capital improvement meeting. The EPA has come down with requirements that these have to be cleaned out more often. And you're all set on the street sweeping, but you have to not only sweep the sand, but now the leaves are becoming an issue. So the catch basin is more their responsibility. I'm sure you could explain it a lot better than myself.
Because like I said, I know because Brian used to do the catch basin cleaning, or has that orange truck, but there are now two wastewater trucks that do that same work. So I just don't know why we're getting a third one if they have that equipment in the city.
If you want, I could
Just
mention it to him, and maybe he could send you the council an email
that would be great.
reporting on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Move 16815 be adopted.
Seconded to adopt 16815. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you, Chiefs. 17015, order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the Mass Office of Health and Human Services, Department of Mental Health for the Police FY16 to FY19 CIT JDP grant in the approximate amount of $119,122 for the purposes of said grant. Chief Martineau.
Thank you, Council. In front of you is the approval for the expenditure of these funds. We continue to be very active on our grant researching at the police department. We were extremely excited this year to have been awarded this jail diversionary program grant. Fitchburg Police was awarded a 3-year diversionary program grant from the Department of Mental Health. In FY16, the department would receive $39,574. FY17, $39,974. And in FY18, $39,574. The total amount of this award is $119,112. The new grant award is a renewal of an ongoing grant that the department has received for the past 3 fiscal years. This grant will enable the department to provide continued training to police officers and dispatchers for either the crisis intervention team or mental health first aid training. More importantly, it will allow the department to continue its CIT deployments in conjunction with Community Health Link. This collaborative outreach program involves sending out teams made up of CIT members and CHL clinicians, along with police officers, to individual homes in our community who are experiencing mental health crises. These deployments provide citizens with much-needed follow-up and consultation during mental health crisis. This has enabled the department to coordinate its efforts more effectively with local services and provide supports to our community.
Move 17015 be adopted.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 170-15. Any questions on the motion? President Hay.
Speaking of the motion, I'd like to thank the chief and his staff for working to get the grant. Mental health issues are prevalent across the board in our society, and they touch every socioeconomic group. And if the police department can help people in need get the appropriate professionals to help them, that's a great thing. So kudos on getting the grant, and hopefully in 2019 you're back telling us you got 3 more years.
I was recently at a meeting in Boston, and Fitchburg was cited as being at the forefront in the mental health crisis and the battle against it. And what we're doing here in Fitchburg is starting to get modeled throughout the state. So we're way ahead of the curve when it comes to this type of training.
Council Kuchmarek.
Chief, it's great to hear you say that we're ahead of the curve. It's certainly great to see you partnering with another great organization in North Central Massachusetts through Community Health Link. There's certainly a growing need for mental health resources throughout the Commonwealth, throughout the country. It's going to continue to grow, as Councillor Hay mentioned, and certainly applaud you for your efforts. This is something that we get to be proactive in doing. Hopefully this is, get to educate people, keep them out of the system. It's the right thing to do. It's a good thing to do, and hopefully it's a wise investment. Ultimately that redirects tax dollars, away from our prisons and jails and law enforcement down the road, and keeps people on the right path.
We've been very fortunate to see the benefits of our first 3 years, and that makes us even that much more excited about the upcoming next 3 years with this grant.
Motion made and seconded to approve 170-15. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? It is unanimous. 171-15, in order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Justice Programs for the Police FY16 Local JAG Award LLEBG grant in the approximate amount of $25,503 for the purposes of said grant. Chief Martineau.
Once again, this is another grant that we applied for over the years and been very fortunate enough to have been awarded. This is much less than the previous award. However, this $25,000, what the department's planning on using this for is to continually update our radio systems. Radio technologies is changing constantly, and if we're trying to stay ahead of it, This year, with this grant, we're looking to purchase 10 to 12 brand-new portable radios for police officers. But in addition to just buying technology, we've made a commitment to start reducing our paper volume at the police department. We've incorporated a program with interns, actually paid interns, where we're reducing our paper footprint, and it's called a scanning project. We have roughly 25 to 30 years worth of paper files at the police station, probably 40 to 50 filing cabinets, and over the last 2 years we've been successful to reduce that by 5 years. So it took 2 years to reduce 5 years worth of paperwork, but we've been fortunate enough to use this grant to take care of that project, and that's the hopes this year as we continue going down that road, and we can reduce our paper footprint by hopefully another 5 years.
Move 171-15 be adopted.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 171-15. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chiefs. Last but not least, 164-15, a petition of Councilor President Stephen Hay to examine the process regarding the necessity of city councilors to sign the weekly warrant. President Hay?
Thank you. It's required that 3 members of the Finance Committee sign the weekly warrant. When we have the 5th Tuesday and we don't have council meetings 4 times a year, and when we have the month of August, I continue to see the assistant auditor sending out the emails and trying to get people in and make sure it all gets signed and all the technicality of it so that they can send out the checks and everybody can get paid. I asked where this came from and how it happened, and the explanation I got was that, in the 1980s at some point a councilor got mad because something got paid that they didn't think was going to get paid, and to keep an eye on things, yada, yada, yada. So they ended up with 3 finance committee members. I don't see the necessity of it. I think that either my first choice would be that the chair of the finance committee sign off, and if he or she is not available, then maybe the president signs off. But I think one signature is more than enough of somebody looking. If Mr. Saracen or Jackie make a mistake, there's very little chance that we're going to catch it. They'll catch it, either before it occurs or sometimes afterwards. And I think it just puts extra pressure on that office to get the warrant signed, and the technical aspect of it is unnecessary for them to have.
This strikes me as a bureaucracy at its finest sometimes, when, there's always that fear, and I see, Mr. Saracen and the assistant auditor kind of, sweating it out for the last minute of hoping that a member of the finance committee can make it in time for the warrants to be paid out. And the reality is, as President Hayes said, if 2 trained and paid professionals can't catch it, are we going to be the ones to catch it at the last minute? We pay them. They're well trained for a reason, and that's because we need to trust our city's personnel to do their job and do it effectively. They have my faith and they have my trust that they were reviewing the numbers and doing it correctly. They also provide us monthly budget reports that allow us to dig down, scrutinize further. If we do have any questions, all too often the questions are answered outside of the warrant, not because of it. It's we go through the process of approving the budget. This is really the execution of the budget. I think I don't think we've ever had any in my time. I haven't seen any questions that have directly arisen from the warrant, and I'm glad to see President Hay put this before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the President. Is this something that's going to have to go through law? My guess was that years ago it was done through the law department. You'd have to probably do something about it this year. You need an ordinance change?
It's in the code.
I don't have a problem with it. As the President mentioned his ideas. I don't have a problem with it, just the legality end of it, and it looks like that can be done kind of quickly. Thank you.
Councilor Tran?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I'm reading this petition, it's quite clear, and it's asking to examine the process. it is not asking us to change the ordinance. Is that what President Hay is asking us, or is he just asking for the process to be examined and researched?
I think my intent was that the Finance Committee members each consider the possibility of changing the ordinance. I didn't want to put an ordinance change forward until we got a feeling. From tonight's input that I'm getting, I will file a petition to change the ordinance in some manner, because I haven't heard any opposition to it, and most of the members seem to be feeling comfortable with some type of change that's overcomes.
So I don't have any reservations in passing this. I think it's a petition asking to look at and do research on the process, and that research would come back to the council president for assessment, and then he'll see as he sees fit to put in a petition to change the ordinance. So I move to adopt 164-15.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 164-15. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
You adjourn?
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.